My family always said I'd never be taken seriously. They called me a failure, a nobody without a college degree. Meanwhile, my sister was the golden child top of her class. Everyone adored her. But then at one of her academic events, a mentor asked, "Wait, that's her algorithm." Suddenly, all eyes were on me. In that moment, everything changed. And I realized I didn't need anyone's approval to prove my worth. My name is Natalie, and growing up, I was never the star student. In fact, if you looked at my report cards, you'd see mostly average grades. I didn't get accepted into any college I applied for, or rather, I didn't apply to any at all. While most kids my age were chasing traditional degrees and diplomas, I was drawn to a different world, the world of data and artificial intelligence. I didn't have the luxury of a formal education in computer science or engineering. Instead, I taught myself. Nights were spent binge watching online courses, reading tutorials, and experimenting with small projects on my own computer. I was fascinated by how data could tell stories and how algorithms could predict outcomes, optimize processes, and even make decisions. This wasn't something I found in school textbooks. It was a whole new universe I wanted to explore on my own terms. At home, things were different. My family didn't understand or support my passion. My parents, and especially my sister, lived in a very different reality. My sister was the golden child top of her class, the star student of the computer science department at a prestigious university. She had the full support and admiration of our family teachers and even the extended relatives. She was everything I was expected to be. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the girl who was interested in computers but never quite fit the mold. My family often said things like, "Natalie's not cut out for academics," or "She should focus on something simpler." They believed I was wasting my time on things I'd never succeed at. They compared me unfavorably to my sister, calling me the girl who's obsessed with machines but has no real future. Despite all this, I kept learning. I was determined to prove that there was more than one way to succeed. A few years ago, I started working on a project of my own. It was a simple but powerful algorithm designed to optimize ad placements for a small tech startup that barely had any recognition. They were struggling to get users and investors, and their marketing efforts weren't delivering results. I spent countless nights perfecting this algorithm, analyzing user behavior testing, ad performance, and tweaking parameters to make the system smarter. It wasn't easy, especially without a team or formal backing. But slowly, the results started to show. The startup's growth rates began to improve. Their user base expanded, and the ads generated more engagement than ever before. What was once a struggling platform began to attract attention in small tech circles. Yet, I stayed in the shadows. I didn't tell my family or my sister what I was doing. Why? Because every time I tried to share my ideas or successes, I was met with skepticism or outright dismissal. I was tired of being the invisible sibling, the one nobody took seriously. At the same time, I still attended family gatherings and supported my sister's achievements as best I could, even if it hurt. Watching her shine while I remained overlooked was painful, but it also fueled a quiet fire inside me. Then came the day of the academic conference where my sister was a keynote speaker. I went not to steal her spotlight, but to support her. I sat quietly at the back of the room, watching as her mentors, professors, and peers discussed breakthroughs and innovations. That's when the unexpected happened. A guest speaker presented about this fast-growing platform and the incredible growth it had experienced recently. They mentioned an algorithm that was credited for optimizing ad revenue and user engagement. I recognized the platform immediately. It was the one I had worked on for months, the one my family didn't even know existed. When the speaker asked the audience who was behind the algorithm, no one answered. It was in that moment, under a spotlight I never asked for, that I stepped forward. Long before that conference, long before anyone ever said the word algorithm with any sense of admiration around me, I lived in a constant shadow. My sister Jessica was always the one who got the attention. From the moment she was born, it seemed like the world had been waiting for her. She was bright, articulate, ambitious, everything a parent could hope for. She got straight A's in school, was student council president, built robots in high school, and received a full scholarship to one of the country's top engineering programs. Every family gathering became a celebration of her latest achievements. My parents would beam with pride, their voices filled with excitement, as they said things like, "Jessica just got invited to a research fellowship," or "Her professor said she's the top in her AI lab." And me, I was just Natalie. If I tried to share something, even something I was proud of, like finishing a tough online course or building a working prototype, it barely registered. My dad once said, "That's cute, Nat," after I showed him a small app I built to track online ad performance. Cute. Like I was a kid showing off a finger painting. Worse yet, I overheard conversations I was never meant to hear. One Thanksgiving, while I was in the kitchen refilling drinks, I heard my aunt whisper to my mom, "So, what's Natalie doing again?" "Still playing with her laptop." My mom gave a half-hearted laugh and said, "She's trying to figure out some tech stuff. Honestly, I don't know if she even understands what she's doing." They didn't believe in me, not because they were cruel, but because they couldn't imagine success without a degree or a formal institution backing it. To them, success wore a cap and gown. It didn't look like me sitting in my room late at night, surrounded by open tabs, online coding forums, and endless cups of coffee. Jessica, of course, didn't mean to hurt me either, but her brilliance had a way of casting long shadows. She would sometimes gently tease me, like when she saw my cluttered notebooks, filled with algorithm ideas, and said, "You know, if you really wanted to do this stuff seriously, you should just go back to school." She said it with a smile, but it stung. There was one moment in particular that I'll never forget. Jessica had invited some of her classmates over during spring break. These were students from elite programs, polished, confident speaking in acronyms and buzzwords that I also knew, but dared not say aloud. I made snacks for everyone and hovered near the doorway, half wanting to join the conversation, half knowing I wasn't welcome. One of the guys, Brian, I think his name was, asked Jessica who her biggest inspiration in tech was. She laughed and said, "Definitely not my sister. She thinks taking online courses makes her a software engineer." Everyone laughed. I didn't say a word. I just went back to my room and cried into my pillow, feeling foolish for ever thinking I could belong in their world. But something changed after that. That night, I stayed up until sunrise. I rebuilt my algorithm from scratch, diving even deeper into optimization models and neural networks. I wanted to prove, not to them, but to myself, that I wasn't a joke. Over the next few months, I poured everything I had into that one project. It started as a challenge to improve ad targeting for a small, underfunded platform. They couldn't pay me much, but they gave me full access and full control, a blank canvas for me to work on. And that's where I created what would later be called the Adaptive Engagement Matrix. It was a system that predicted which types of ads worked best for different users at different times of day, adjusting campaigns in real time based on dozens of behavioral signals. At first, it wasn't perfect, but then the numbers began to speak. Click-through rates went up. Session durations increased. Bounce rates dropped. Advertisers were impressed, and word started to spread. The startup's CEO sent me emails with subject lines like "You did it, and we just landed another investor." But I didn't forward those to my family. I knew better. Instead, I just kept working silently. Meanwhile, Jessica's world kept getting bigger. She was chosen as a student representative for an international AI conference. Our parents were ecstatic. They said it was the most prestigious moment in our family's history. That's when she invited me to the conference. Not as a guest speaker, of course, but as her plus one. I wasn't even sure why I agreed to go. Maybe a small part of me wanted to feel like I belonged in that world, even if just for one afternoon. I bought a plain black dress, tied my hair back, and told myself I'd just smile and clap and blend into the background. And I did it first. I sat in the very back row, notebook in hand, quietly scribbling notes on the talks. But then came a speaker from a venture capital firm. He pulled up a case study on a startup that had tripled its ad revenue in 6 months. He highlighted the system they were using, an AI-powered ad optimization engine that adapted in real time. My heart skipped. I recognized the screenshots, the layout, the logic behind the performance graphs. It was mine. I froze in my seat. The speaker's slide lit up with a screenshot I had seen 1,000 times before. My dashboard layout, the curve of optimization efficiency, even the distinct color-coded metrics that I had chosen during one all-nighter. My heart thudded in my chest. Jessica was seated at the front row, laughing softly with 2 classmates, completely unaware. And what's remarkable, the speaker continued, is that this particular startup managed to achieve a 214% growth in ad efficiency within 6 months, thanks to an innovative algorithm designed in-house, though the developer remains anonymous, for now. The audience murmured, impressed. Someone whispered, "That's insane." He flipped to another slide. This one broke down the technicals, dynamic input weights, behavioral trend, mapping, segmented cohort learning. I could feel the room spinning. That was mine. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore, at least not to myself. For so long, I had believed that if my work was good enough, people would eventually notice. And now they were. They didn't know it was me. I should have stood up, should have said, "That's mine." But I couldn't. My mouth was dry, my hands shaking. I felt so out of place in my plain black dress, surrounded by polished, confident people who belonged here. All I could do was stare. The presentation ended to a loud round of applause. People clapped, some even whistled. The speaker smiled and said, "We'll be watching this company closely. Whoever built that algorithm is someone to look out for." As people rose for the coffee break, Jessica turned around, saw me still sitting, and called out, "Come on, Nat. There's a networking table outside." I nodded weakly, following her into the lobby. The room buzzed with conversation. Engineers, researchers, investors, all exchanging business cards and insights. I stood quietly by the refreshment table, stirring a cup of coffee I didn't really want, while Jessica floated from one group to another, seamlessly blending in. She belonged. I didn't. That's when I noticed someone watching me. She was older, in her mid-40s maybe, with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. She wasn't mingling like the others. She stood near a wall, arms folded, observing, and she was looking right at me. I looked away, pretending to check my phone. She walked over. "Excuse me," she said. "Were you taking notes during the session on adaptive optimization?" I looked up, surprised. Yeah, I know that system well. You recognized the framework, she asked, tilting her head. I hesitated, then nodded. I built it. She blinked, then smiled slightly. You built that. I nodded again, heart pounding. Interesting, she said, holding out her hand. I'm Elise Turner. I advise for 3 VC firms and head a mentoring program for women in AI. I'd love to talk. The next 30 minutes changed everything. We sat at a corner table. I opened my laptop and showed her the back-end logic, the training data configurations, and the testing logs. Her expression never changed, calm, focused, impressed. When I finished, she said only one word. Brilliant. I didn't think anyone would believe me. I admitted. They will, she said, and they should. Just then, Jessica walked over. Oh, hey, I didn't realize you two were talking. Elise turned to her, smiled politely. You must be Natalie's sister. Jessica blinked. Yeah. How do you know, Nat? She built the system we just saw. I'm talking to her about an advisory role on a project I'm incubating. Jessica's jaw dropped. Wait, that's your algorithm? Elise nodded, her eyes still on me. She's sitting on one of the most adaptable engagement models I've seen in years. I'd be surprised if she's not hired full-time within the next month. Jessica didn't respond. She just stared. For the rest of the day, the tone shifted. People started approaching me. Elise introduced me to other mentors, engineers, even investors. For the first time, I wasn't the girl on the sidelines. I was the girl with answers. When someone asked about neural layering or behavioral segmentation, Elise pointed to me. I explained with confidence because I had lived inside that code for over a year. I had failed, rebuilt, tested, and optimized every single part of it. Jessica didn't say much. On the drive home, it was quiet. She finally said, I had no idea you were doing something this big. I tried to tell you. I said, I guess I thought, I don't know. You weren't serious. That's what everyone thought. I'm sorry. I nodded. It's okay. But it wasn't really okay, not yet. In the days that followed, Elise and I had several calls. She connected me with a small but ambitious startup working on ethical AI moderation. They were looking for someone to build a recommendation engine that didn't just optimize for profit, but for user well-being. It was a dream project. I said yes. Meanwhile, the word spread. That startup I had helped. They posted a blog titled, How One Unknown Developer Transformed Our Platform. They didn't mention my name directly at first, but Elise insisted they correct that. A week later, an update went live with a new headline, Natalie Moore, the mind behind our growth. That article changed everything. My LinkedIn blew up. Recruiters started messaging. People from my past classmates, old colleagues, even relatives, started sending congratulations. And then came the family dinner. It was my parents' anniversary, and everyone was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and Jessica, of course, who now looked at me differently, not with pity, with something closer to respect. As I sat down, my uncle said, So Natalie, I saw your name in an article last week. Something about AI. I smiled. Yeah, it's been a wild month. My dad asked, Is that really your work? The thing they talked about at the conference. Yes, I said simply. The room went quiet for a moment. Then my mom whispered, I didn't realize you were working on something so serious. I nodded. I've been working on it for a long time. Jessica spoke up. She's incredible. Honestly, Nat knows more about real-world implementation than most of my professors. It was the first time she had ever said something like that. For once, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. I didn't need their validation, but getting it felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. I had spent so long in the shadows, convinced that I had to wear someone else's skin to be seen a student badge, a fancy degree, a title. But now I realized I didn't need any of that. I just needed to be Natalie, the girl who refused to quit, the woman they finally noticed. 3 weeks after the conference, I received a formal invitation. Elise had nominated me to be a keynote panelist at the upcoming Tech Forward Summit. This wasn't just another local event. This was national, streamed online, watched by CEOs, tech reporters, and venture capitalists. I stared at the email, heart pounding. It was real. The topic: the future of responsible algorithms. They wanted me. At first, I hesitated, not because I didn't feel ready, but because I knew who else would be there. Jessica's university was a co-sponsor. Her mentor, Professor Langen, was on the hosting committee. This meant Jessica would absolutely be there too. I accepted. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but because I had worked for this. Because I deserved to be there, not in the shadows, not at the back of the room, but center stage. On the day of the summit, I walked in wearing a tailored navy blazer, hair pulled back, notes in hand. I had never felt more like myself. Elise greeted me at the entrance. "You ready?" she asked. I smiled. More than ever. Backstage, I ran into Professor Langen. She gave me a quick, curious glance, then did a double take. "Natalie, Jessica's sister." "Yes," I replied evenly. She looked puzzled. "You're the keynote panelist." "Elise invited me," I said, "based on my algorithm." A beat of silence. Then her eyes widened. "Wait, you're the one behind the growth engine?" I nodded. She didn't know what to say. Moments later, I stepped onto the stage. The room was packed. Hundreds of attendees, flashing lights, cameras. I sat down between Elise and another founder. The moderator began with a question about ethical design. I answered clearly, explaining how user-first models can outperform even profit-maximizing systems if designed with long-term retention in mind. The audience listened, took notes. Some even nodded. Then came the big moment. The moderator said, "Let's talk about the algorithm behind Nexa's recent leap. It's been called one of the most effective tools of the year, and we're lucky to have the mind behind it with us today. Natalie, would you walk us through how it works and what inspired it?" I took a breath, and then I told them everything, not in code or jargon, but in human terms. I told them how I started with nothing, no degree, no funding, no credibility, just YouTube videos, online courses, and a stubborn refusal to give up. I told them how I spent nights testing models, tweaking outputs, obsessing over ethical design, when everyone else just wanted faster conversions. The room was silent. When I finished, they clapped. Loudly. Elise leaned over and whispered, "You just changed your life." After the panel, people lined up to speak with me. Recruiters, journalists, founders. Someone from Google handed me a card. Another from MIT asked if I'd consider giving a guest lecture. I was overwhelmed in the best way. And then I saw Jessica. She stood at the edge of the crowd, frozen. Her mentor was beside her, nodding slowly, visibly impressed. I approached. "Hey," I said. Jessica looked at me like she barely recognized who I was. "That was," she began, "incredible." "Thanks," I said simply. Her mentor stepped forward. "You've built something really special. Have you ever considered applying to graduate programs? With your work, you'd be fast-tracked into any top-tier program." I smiled. "I appreciate that. But I'm not sure grad school is the path for me. I'm already building things." And now, people are finally listening. He nodded, impressed. Jessica stayed quiet. Before I left, she said softly, "I was wrong about you." I turned to her. I know, but I didn't know how wrong. That's okay, I said. You weren't the only one. Then I walked away, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need anything more from her. No apology could give me back those years of self-doubt. But this moment, it was mine. Later that week, an article about the panel went viral on LinkedIn. The headline read, "She was laughed out of her own family. Now Silicon Valley's listening." It included a photo of me speaking on stage mid-sentence confident. Underneath it, hundreds of comments poured in. Other self-taught coders, women in tech, people who had been told they didn't belong. They called me inspiring, brave, a role model. I cried that night, not because I had proved them wrong, but because for the first time, I had finally proved myself right. A month later, I was back in my childhood home for the first time in a while. It was my dad's birthday, and my mom insisted on having a family dinner. I almost said no. But something in me wanted to go, not to prove a point, but to exist there again, on my own terms. The same living room where I used to sit with my laptop ignored and underestimated now felt different. When I walked in, the room quieted. My aunt paused mid-sentence. My uncle blinked. Jessica stood awkwardly near the kitchen, fidgeting with her bracelet. And then my mom said, "Natalie, come sit by me. I want to hear all about your summit." It wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't patronizing. She genuinely wanted to know. So I told them. I talked about Elise the panel, the offers I'd received. I didn't embellish, didn't brag. I just spoke plainly like I always had. By the end, even my dad leaned back and said, "Guess you really made something out of all that." Computer stuff. I smiled. Yeah, I guess I did. After dinner, Jessica pulled me aside. "I still don't get how you did it," she said. "No degree, no lab, no team." I looked at her and said, "Sometimes not fitting into the system is what lets you build a better one." That night, I drove home with the windows down, wind in my face, a quiet kind of peace settling in. They didn't need to fully understand me. They just needed to see me. And finally, they did.